6 years of civil war. Passengers on that ill-fated commuter flight in Colorado say they had no warning the plane was going to crash. Screams in the subway. A man attacks some 20 people with chemical mace as they wait for a train in New York. Florida's first week with a state lottery turns landslide. $95 million bet. Those stories and much more right after Valerie Voss takes a look at the weather.
Thank you, Dave. A quiet day across most of the nation today. Just teens and 20s, though, for high temperatures from the upper Mississippi River Valley through the northern plains and into the central Rocky Mountains. Still mild in New England, 30s and 40s. There's been a bit of precipitation in that area. Some snow in northern Maine. Should ease up throughout the day. Rain will continue in coastal sections of the southeast and scattered across Florida. 80s just for the southern tip of Florida today. Quiet out in the west also, although some snow with a frontal system will be scattered across the Rocky Mountains and into the northern plains. 40s for the Pacific Northwest, 60s today in Southern California. We'll be back with some local forecasts right after this. A complete look at the weather coming up in about 15 minutes, but right now, here's a look at the Thursday forecast for some cities around the country. DayWatch continues. Stay with us.
This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
The Navy destroys an unarmed Trident II missile this morning after what appeared to be a successful launch.
And the government of Nicaragua asked to meet with Contra leaders a week ahead of schedule. We'll have those stories and more as the news continues for this Thursday, January the 21st.
This is DayWatch on CNN. With Reid Collins in Washington, Dave Monsees in New York, and from CNN Center in Atlanta, Molly McCoy and Brian Nelson.
Good morning, everyone. Nicaraguan Contra rebels say they want to hold early talks with the Nicaraguan government, but the talks cannot begin immediately. A Nicaraguan government delegation arrived in Costa Rica last night, asking for the first ever direct talks between the two sides to begin today. The negotiations on a ceasefire were to start next week. A Contra delegation is in Costa Rica for a meeting today with mediator Cardinal Miguel Obando y Bravo about those talks. A spokeswoman for the Contras says face-to-face talks cannot get underway until a ceasefire commission is set up. That could take a few more days. The Contras believe an early start on negotiations could be to their advantage. If the talks stall, it could help win approval for more U.S. aid to the rebels.
And a scaled-back Contra Aid request reportedly will be sent by the White House to the Congress next week. Washington Post says President Reagan will ask for $50 million for the rebels. That's a far cry from the previous reports of $270 and even $100 million. An official told the Post that lower figure is likely to be more palatable to the Congress. Mr. Reagan himself was telling Contra supporters yesterday the majority of the new assistance package will be non-lethal aid. He warned that failure to approve further Contra help would be a tragic mistake.
If Congress votes down aid, we will be abandoning the only real cause for peace and freedom in Nicaragua. We will be consigning the peace process to an obscure footnote in history and handing the Soviet Union one of its greatest strategic victories since World War II.
Any aid request sent these days to Capitol Hill cannot be amended. Both chambers have until February the 4th to vote up or down on the proposal.
Officials at the New York Stock Exchange may move to head off another market crash like last October's 500-point drop. Chairman John Phelan says the Stock Exchange Board might institute temporary trading halts on individual stocks whose prices rise or fall too much in one day. Final decision could be made next month.
A survivor of a commuter plane crash in Colorado says it all happened so fast passengers didn't even have time to scream. 9 people died in the crash of a Continental Express plane Tuesday night about 12 miles east of Durango. 8 others survived, including 7 who trekked through waist-high snow to summon help. The survivors say the twin-engine turboprop plane crashed after snagging a wing on a hill as the plane prepared for landing in Durango. The National Transportation Safety Board is expected to release preliminary findings on that crash tonight.
Police have no clues as to who sprayed dozens of New York commuters with a noxious chemical last night as they waited on a crowded subway platform. The victims suffered watery eyes, nausea, and dizziness. 25 people were treated at the hospital, 12 at the scene, none seriously hurt. Police don't know what the vapor was. They believe the culprit was riding between the cars of a train.
The potentially death-dealing effects of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster could linger for 30 years, that according to an association of British farmers. The Chernobyl plant fire killed 31 people directly, but the radioactive cloud that raced over Europe could cause thousands of cancer deaths. And in northern Britain, landowners there say that sheep still show levels of radioactive cesium 3 times what it is considered to be safe. And the farmers say that government rules restricting movement and the slaughter of animals may have to remain in effect for 30 years. The British Landowners Association is demanding a scientific inquiry to determine the true cost of Chernobyl.
North Korea is threatening to start a war with South Korea unless the two countries resolve their differences. A Communist Party spokesman in North Korea says his country would, quote, have no choice but to make a war. The divided nation is now separated by a demilitarized zone that serves as a buffer. One of the issues North Korea wants to address is large-scale military exercises in South Korea. North Korea has also demanded a significant role in hosting the '88 Summer Olympics, but the spokesman did not say specifically whether disagreement over the Olympics could cause a war. The defense secretary of the Philippines has resigned because he says the Aquino government is not doing enough to fight the communist insurgency. Defense Secretary Rafael Aleto says military action against the rebels has been too diversified to be effective. Aleto is being replaced by Chief of Staff Fidel Ramos. Ramos helped bring President Aquino to power. He's been instrumental in warding off several coup attempts. A spokesman for the communist rebels said in a clandestine interview that the appointment of Ramos will lead to more attacks against the rebels.
An increase in foreign competition reportedly has prompted the Reagan administration to allow U.S. civilian satellites to start taking pictures from outer space. Constraints had been placed on the private satellites by the Defense Department in the fear that detailed photographs of Earth might reveal military secrets. But today's New York Times says foreign competitors have begun marketing space photographs with far better resolution than those taken by American companies. The new policy is expected to allow the United States to catch up with this competition and produce some sharper images of the Earth for scientists, geographers, and the urban planner. Well, up until now, there had been 8 near-perfect tests of the new Trident II submarine-launched missile, and the liftoff in the 9th test from a launch stand on the ground at Cape Canaveral looked smooth in Florida just before dawn this morning, but this all ended in destruction high over the Atlantic and out of view. The Air Force had to destroy the missile by radio command after it apparently veered off course some 3 minutes after it left. The $24 million missile was unarmed. It is designed, though, to carry as many as 12 nuclear warheads.
The Soviet people are remembering Vladimir Lenin today on the anniversary of his death. Hundreds lined up outside of Lenin's tomb in the Kremlin wall to pay their respects to the leader today. Lenin died 64 years ago. He led the October Revolution of 1917, in which the communists seized power from the czars. Lenin was a ruthless leader, but toward the end of his life, he tried to limit the use of violence in government.
Coming up on the DayWatch, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has some new members. We're going to tell you who they are.
And the Duchess of York makes a visit to the Eugene O'Neill Theater in Connecticut, and we'll have a report on that, too. Don't go away.
The crowd at last night's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was all shook up, thanks to Beach Boy singer Mike Love. Love criticized several rockers at the event and a few who weren't there, such as Diana Ross and Paul McCartney. He called Ross's and McCartney's absence a bummer. There was some hope that the 3 remaining Beatles would be reunited at last night's ceremony, but it was not to be. The Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Supremes, the Drifters, and Bob Dylan all were inducted into the Hall of Fame. Woody Guthrie, Les Paul, Lead Belly, and Motown founder Berry Gordy also were honored at that event.
A royal guest of honor will attend a benefit performance this evening of Broadway's Phantom of the Opera. Britain's Duchess of York is the royal guest. She arrived here in the United States yesterday and spent an artsy morning in Connecticut. CNN's Richard Roth was there.
The trip from London and then the ride to the Connecticut boyhood home of playwright Eugene O'Neill turned into a long day's journey into rain for the Duchess of York. The combination of rain and tight security kept spectators to a minimum.
Thank you very much. What's your name? Are you cold, Olivia? Are you sure? Thank you for the lovely flowers. Aren't you pretty? Shall we go in? Yes.
Once in out of the rain, the former Sarah Ferguson was given a quick but visual tour of the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center.
And the thief even called later to apologize. So Cleo and Bélanger are reunited. The story has a happy ending, and Cleo gets the last laugh. His life expectancy, 75 to 100 years. You dance too. John Grant, CBC News, St. Foy.
Some of the recording industry's biggest names are now enshrined in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Bob Dylan was on hand to be honored along with most surviving members of the Beatles, Beach Boys, Drifters, and the Supremes. But all was not in perfect harmony at last night's induction ceremony in New York. Beach Boy Mike Love blasted those not attending.
I think it's wonderful to be here tonight, but I also think it's sad that there are other people who aren't here tonight. People like Paul McCartney, who couldn't be here tonight because he's in a lawsuit with Ringo and Yoko. That's a bummer when Ms. Ross can't make it, you know?
The nominees to the Hall of Fame are limited to music greats who were recording at least 25 years ago. Headline Sports is next.
In the weather today, rainfall to tell you about along the southeastern coast and down across central Florida, too. One tornado reported today, that in Volusia County. A bit of damage, no injuries reported. Power lines blown down, tree limbs blown down. We're watching a front rolling out of the Rockies, bringing lots of wind into the central Plains states area. Nebraska having a problem with blowing snow. Not so much snowfall today, but snowfall from 2 days ago being blown around now, reducing visibilities. There will be some heavy snow, however, it appears. In the Sangre de Cristo Mountains of Colorado, they expect up to 8 inches of snow. Weather details later. Right now, take a look at specific forecasts for cities around the nation for tomorrow.
This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
Hello from New York. I'm Liz Wickersham.
And I'm Bill Tush, sitting in for Lee Leonard, and this is Showbiz Today, live Thursday, January 21st, 1988. We'll take a look at some legends inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll talk with Knots Landing star Donna Mills. We'll meet Sally Kirkland, voted Best Actress by the LA Film Critics for her role in Anna. And Chita Rivera goes on the road in Can Can.
30 weeks of Can Can.
At the top of the showbiz headlines, last night in New York, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame held the third induction ceremony, honoring 9 groups or individuals for their contributions to the genre. Bill was there until early this morning at the Waldorf Astoria. Bill?
That's right, Liz. It was a lot of fun, and some of the rock legends who were there made it that way. But there was fun, but for those of us in the press, there was a lot of work. Every time an honoree entered the press room, there was a mad crush of media to talk with people like Little Richard, Beach Boy Brian Wilson, who rarely appears in public, and Les Paul, one of the true innovators of electric guitar music. For as many musical stars that showed up at the very crowded press reception, the really big names saved their appearances for the awards ceremony itself in the Waldorf's Grand Ballroom. Mick Jagger presented the honor to the Beatles, acknowledging their help in his own career.
Later on, their success in America broke down a lot of doors that helped everyone else from England that followed. And I thank them very much for all those things.
George Harrison and Ringo Starr were on hand with Yoko Ono to accept the honor, but Paul McCartney stayed away, citing business differences with his former partners. Harrison commented on the other missing Beatle, John Lennon.
It's hard really to stand here supposedly representing the Beatles. It's what's left, I'm afraid. But we all loved him so much.
Bruce Springsteen had high words of praise for rock's poet laureate, Bob Dylan.
Dylan was a revolutionary, man. The way that Elvis freed your body, Bob freed your mind.
Dylan, in turn, credited those who came before him.
I'd like to thank a couple of people who are here tonight, who helped me out a great deal coming up. Little Richard, who's sitting over there. I don't think I'd even started out without listening to Little Richard.
So won't you hurry? Come on, boy, see about me.
Mary Wilson accepted the induction into the hall on behalf of the Supremes. She, too, remembered a late partner of the girl group, Florence Ballard.
That Florence could not live to be here to know that what we as three little girls, three insecure little girls, had dreamt of could possibly come true. It saddens me.
Billy Joel sang the praises of the Drifters, who had 4 lead singers voted into the hall. Elton John presented the award to the Beach Boys.
This band were geniuses, they still are. I mean, but they made me love America so much more because they existed. Get around, I get around, yeah, get around, round, I get around.
In a rather rowdy acceptance speech, Beach Boy Mike Love offered a challenge to fellow rockers.
The Beach Boys have continued to do we did about 180 performances last year. I'd like to see the Mop Tops match that. I'd like to see Mick Jagger get out on the stage and do I Get Around versus Jumpin' Jack Flash any day now.
The late Woody Guthrie has joined the ranks of the hall, but his son Arlo remembered the folk singer's indifference to publicity.
I am fairly positive that if my dad had been alive today, this is the one place he wouldn't be.
But most of the honorees and presenters enjoyed the limelight. They gathered for what is quickly becoming a Hall of Fame tradition, the celebrity-studded jam session at the end of the show. Quite a night. Joining us now live in our New York studios is Les Paul, inducted last night into the Hall of Fame as an early influence. In fact, Les Paul may be called the father of the electric guitar and multi-track recording. Les, congratulations.
Thank you.
We might add that you were up on stage with all those rock and rollers that you helped to influence. How much influence do you think your steel or your solid body guitar had on rock and roll?
I think it played a very important part because I don't think you can find a group that doesn't have electric guitar in it. And, of course, being the inventor of it, I guess I contributed something to it, you know.
I was at the press reception last night with those 100,000 other reporters that mobbed you and you came in, and I heard you telling a story that at one point when Gibson, correct me if I'm wrong, Gibson, when they took over your guitar, said to you that it's not going to last in music.
Or they were going to strike it out from the line. They thought that it was extinct, that it was a novelty, and in 1966, they were going to scrap the whole thing. And I went to Chicago to plead with them that they were wrong and to put it back in the line and continue on. Of course, it was a great success.
We have some video of you and your late wife, Mary Ford, who the two of you did so many hit records together back, I guess, what, in the early 50s, late 40s. How would you describe the music you played then? It wasn't rock and roll.
No.
Subscription to CNN and Headline News. All minutes are guaranteed within 48 hours when you call 1-800-377-1234. Cable subscribers disregard this message. Your local system is working with CNN and Headline News. Clear signal for you. Your programming will be conserved shortly. Viewers, as you can see, CNN and Headline News.
Well, I was very happy to see it happen, and of course, what I wasn't prepared for was the rock and roll, but neither was Benny Goodman or Bing Crosby or Sinatra or anybody else, for that matter. So it did put a lot of guys out of work, a lot of people out of work when rock came in, and of course, it changed the whole world.
Did the critics at the time, when you first started using your guitar and doing that type of music, you did, what, a lot of overdubbing and multiple recording? What did the critics say about it back then?
Well, the critics at that time, when I first came out with the idea of the multi-track recording, they thought it was a novelty, they thought that it was a gimmick, And then by the end of 5 years, they said, my goodness, this is the way to go. But for that first 5 years, the problem is most of the record companies that had a multi-track machine said, where are we going to find a Les Paul Mary Ford to use this machine? They didn't realize that it could apply to the Beatles and could apply to Elvis.
Well,
that changed the world.
We're happy that they all found out about it, and we're happy you brought it to us. Les, again, congratulations.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Liz and I will be right back after these messages.
Still to come on Showbiz Today, we'll chat with nighttime soap star Donna Mills. Tomorrow, rocker David Lee Roth goes on tour for his new album. And next week, we'll profile actor Carl Weathers, who is starring in the new movie Action Jackson. Stay tuned for the latest showbiz news.